Welcome to episode 6 of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. The energy right now is substantially high right now. We have a lot to talk about today. We've got a lot of headlines to dissect, announcements to be made, and new releases to anticipate. This is the final episode before the most anticipated title of the year comes out. We are T-minus, 1, 2, 3. Holy crap, really? 3? Man, time is flying. We're 3 days away from Red Dead Redemption 2, which we are celebrating here today. This time next week, the game will be out in the wild, and we will be discussing it in depth. I hope to get it. I'm not pre-ordering it. I'm done with pre-ordering games. That's not what I do anymore. That was something I did in the past a lot, but now there's just really no incentive to pre-order anymore. But hopefully, I will get my hands on the game this week. And I might dedicate some time on next week's episode to go in depth and, have a mini spoiler cast. I'm not sure if I want to dedicate an entire episode, but we'll get into more of that later on. We do have some announcements to make, but before we do that, to any new listeners out there, you should know that the DualShock Graveyard is a gaming podcast with a horror spin to it. So we are available on many platforms. A couple updates on some of these platforms real quick. For anybody listening to this show on SoundCloud, you should know that from this point forward, SoundCloud will only have the previous 3 episodes, as opposed to all the other platforms which have the entire archive available readily. SoundCloud, because of some shenanigans with their space, and because I refuse to pay for any pro accounts for that, it will only be hosting the previous 3 episodes, so you'll always get the latest 3 there, if for anybody interested. And a quick update on the Twitch implementation of the show. That is coming very soon. In fact, I'm looking right now actually at the webcam that I purchased so I can start streaming these episodes. I'm still working out the kinks, so to speak, figuring some stuff out, but either next week or the week after, one of those two, we will be premiering Twitch implementation. And by that I mean, once again, it's not going to be a live podcast. It's going to be a live stream of me pre-recording the show, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Actually, it makes perfect sense. It's exactly what it is. I'm live streaming me pre-recording an episode. And, it's there. I figured I wanted to do it live someday. This is kind of like a preview of that. So, any of you out there curious at all, the Twitch page is actually available right now if you want to go ahead and follow that. It is Ambient Jules, just like my Twitter, except the underscroll. So it's just Ambient Jules, one word. That is the official Twitch channel of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. I believe that does it for the announcements this week. I do want to take a second, though, to kind of give not a longer introduction, but kind of just how do I word this? Just a quick, proper introduction, and not just for new listeners, but this is really for everybody. There are many gaming podcasts out there. It's a very accessible hobby, which is really cool. I'm glad that this type of thing is available for so many people. Because it's so accessible, many people are out there starting podcasts, which is really cool. So it's not just about starting it, which was actually fairly simple. It's more about standing out at this point. One of the ways that I try to distance myself from other shows is a lot of the more popular gaming podcasts out there, they're from people with experience, whether they be, they're game journalists or game outlets. You got your IGNs, your GameSpots, your Kind of Funnies, your Sacred Symbols. They're all of them. What they have in common is they're insiders. They're journalists. They know people in the industry. I do not. I am not any of that, which I think kind of gives a very keen outside perspective on what's going on in the world of gaming. And more than anything, I feel like that's what excites me about this show. This is a show for people who love video games, for the fans, by a fan. I'm not a insider. I'm certainly not a journalist. I don't have sources. I don't know any game developers. I'm simply a dirty ass Mexican who loves playing video games and discussing video games. That's it. That's all this show is. It comes from that perspective. So I feel, at least, that's what kind of gives the show a grounded, accessible word vomit, an accessible feel to it. And by accessible, I mean, and this is what I've been trying to say since the beginning of the show, this show is a show for fans by fans, and I feel the key to that is being accessible. So again, for the millionth time, my Twitter handle, ambient_Jules, is the official, well, so far only, communication hub for the show. You can follow me there, and literally anyone, you out there listening, can contribute to the show with feedback, questions. I might start taking questions as well, which is where you can come in, I suppose. Any questions that you might have, depending on whichever topic, send them over, and I'll certainly set aside some time to answer those questions. And at this point, at this juncture, any question will do right now. And if you do send me a question, it's very likely that I will read it on air and answer it. It's a very small show still. We're 6 episodes deep. Although I am quite pleased with the downloads that I'm getting, with the feedback I've been getting. You guys have been very kind. Some not so kind, but again, what are you gonna do? It's a young show. It's still finding its legs, so it is what it is. What are you gonna do? But that being said, though, I do want to get into the show and start this week off, of course, with the weekly release, the releases of the week, what have you. So today, being, what is today? The 23rd of October of the year 2018. Today itself, we actually have a couple releases. Today sees the release of the first piece of DLC for Spider-Man, entitled The Heist. It is part 1 of 3 pieces of DLC confirmed for Spider-Man, and the first episode does come out today. So if you're interested at all, that's available. I believe it's $10 separately. Despite it coming out today, I have heard and read a couple of things about it. Apparently, it's quite short. It's very short. It's 2.5 hours of story for $10. Many opinions floating out about that. I'm myself of the opinion of quality over quantity. If it's 2.5 hours of really good gameplay, which, of course, Spider-Man being great, I platinumed it recently, and it's the only platinum trophy I've ever gotten. And the reason why is because the gameplay is what kept me playing. It's such fluid, Spidey gameplay as far as the swinging and the combat. The combat is just so fluid and addictive. It just pushed me forward, and it was the main motivator of me getting the platinum trophy. It's a fun game. So $10 for a couple more hours of that, with the promise of more on the way. If the story's good, I suppose it's worth it, I guess. So there you go. Part 1 of 2, Spider-Man DLC. The Heist is out today for $10. Or you can pay $25 for the season pass and get all 3 when they come out. I believe the second part might be next month in December. Or you could just wait until the end of December. Maybe the first half of next year they'll come out with the Game of the Year edition, which includes everything. So, which is the route a lot of people are going with, by the way. I'm definitely, like, as far as fighting games, for example, that's a whole nother tangent I could get on. We're going to skip that. But there you go. Spider-Man DLC out today. We move on to Just Dance 2019 is out today as well. this is one that I wanted to bring up because it's interesting because it's being released on the PS4, obviously, the Xbox One, obviously, PC, the Switch. It's also coming out for the Xbox 360, the Wii U, and the original Wii. I want to point out that there are only two franchises that come to mind. FIFA Soccer, and Just Dance. Because they're so casualized and so accessible to everyone, it's one of those franchises that get ported over to the older consoles. As a matter of fact, I believe FIFA 14, that was the first next-gen FIFA game. They ported that all the way over to the PS2, which blows my mind. If you Google image search FIFA 14 PS2, you'll see the art for the PS2 version of FIFA 14, which is very funny and very interesting. Something for you to laugh at today. And finally, of course, a game that requires no introduction. Red Dead Redemption 2 is finally in our grasp. Just a few more days, of course, if you've pre-ordered it. I believe right now you can actually preload the game on the PS4, at least, as far as I know. I could be wrong. But even if I am wrong, then it'll certainly be available within the next couple days before the game comes out. You can actually preload the game right now, which means if you pre-ordered it digitally, you can actually install the game so that when the day comes, you could just hit play and the game will launch. So I'm still blown away and overwhelmed at how fast October 26th got here. It feels like just yesterday we were hitting the beginning of October, and the time is just going to go even faster. I mean, November's going to come pretty soon. Thanksgiving's going to come. The holiday season will be here, and year after year, it feels like the holidays have been going by much faster too. And as I talk about how we're already at the end of October 26th, we're going to hit January just as quick, and it'll come just as fast. So make sure you're not letting time pass you by as well as it has passed me by. I believe that'll do it for the releases this week. Again, I only present the ones that are substantial and the ones that I'm interested in, but of course that's not all the games. If I presented every single title that came out this week, I mean, this would be a 30-minute segment, and that's not what I'm trying to do. But if there is a title that I did miss and you think is worth mentioning, you can certainly let me know, and I might set some time as well to a little recommendation from the fans. A little segment of that might be in order as well, if I do miss too many games. But we move on. Hang on, we're not moving on. This isn't a release, actually. This is actually a price drop. One of the greatest games ever made that came out this year, God of War, is now, starting today, $20 cheaper at the price of $40. So for $40, you can now get God of War. If you've ever been curious at all, if you're a fan of the series, I'm sure you've already played it by now, but if you've been holding out for some reason, the time is now, because God of War is now $40. So that's that. Coming back to Spider-Man though, before the DLC came out, actually, there was a update. You know, games get updated. So Spider-Man had an update where they added New Game Plus, which is great. I am a huge fan of New Game Plus. For those that don't know, it's mostly for single-player games. It's usually when you play a story mode for the first time. Let's say for God of War. You know, actually, since we're talking about Spider-Man, let's use Spider-Man for the example. So you start out, you're Spider-Man, a very weak Spider-Man, and throughout the duration of the game, you know, you upgrade your webs, you upgrade your powers, your suits, you get new costumes, different perks for the suits. And usually the way it was back in the day, if you wanted to start a new game over, you would have to start over from the beginning, which meant you would have to build your character up again. But within the past few years, many game developers have been adding this thing called New Game Plus, which is basically you can start a brand new game over, but you keep all your upgrades from your previous save. And I feel like that is for people like me who don't have as much time as they used to play video games, but still want to enjoy the story mode of a game a second time. So I've recently been playing God of War New Game Plus just to enjoy the story again. I forgot how satisfying the gameplay was, and being able to just kind of bum rush through it. Well, I enhanced the difficulty. It's still kind of a challenge, but just knowing that I could just go through the story again with my powerful version of Kratos and experience the story once again is great. And again, Spider-Man just added this, so if I ever do want to go through the story again, that's a definite good option as well. New Game Plus is definitely a trend that should continue on to next gen and should actually be a standard as far as all future single-player titles, which I'm very confident will be. But we move on from that, though. There are quite a few things I want to get to today. A bit of breaking news here, actually. Days Gone, one of the PS4's final exclusives, has been delayed. I want to say again, but I'm not sure if there was a solid release date before this. I think February 22nd was its first actual release date, but that is no longer the release date because it's been delayed 2 months and will now be launching on April 26, 2019. Another delay. Delayed games seems to be a common trend these days among the most important AAA games. This one in particular, though, is kind of interesting because Days Gone, for those that don't know, is a post-apocalyptic zombie game from Sony Bend, the makers of the old Siphon Filter games for the original PlayStation. And their last game was Uncharted. They made an Uncharted game for the Vita, Golden Abyss. But before that, their last console game was actually a PS2 game, Siphon Filter: The Omega Strain. Just a little fun fact for you there. But it's interesting because I was of the mindset that Sony would try to release this game first and kind of get it out of the way, because I've always felt like this game is very similar to The Last of Us, being that it is another post-apocalyptic zombie game. Even though the zombies in The Last of Us aren't zombies, they're infected, it's still that same style of game. I remember actually when Days Gone came out, I was kind of thrown off by the fact that they have another post-apocalyptic game. They're kind of muddying the waters here a bit as far as the exclusives of similar genres. And we know which one is obviously more substantial to Sony, which is The Last of Us Part 2, which is coming out. There actually is no release date right now, but you would think that they would try to kind of keep those two games distant. Days Gone does look, I'm not trying to shit on Days Gone. Days Gone does look very good. It is a high quality AAA PS4 game. A 5-minute clip, a brand new 5-minute clip came out recently. It looks better every time I see it. But it did get delayed. It kind of does make sense why it got delayed too. It is the same day that Anthem comes out, which is the EA BioWare game, which seems to be the next big AAA kind of Destiny-like live service-y game. That it's a brand new IP from BioWare. It's going to be massive, and it's also coming on. I believe Metro Exodus was also coming out that same day too, which is the third game of the Metro franchise. That another post-apocalyptic shooter, which is now open world. I was actually a fan of the first two Metro games, and I'm actually not really happy with the fact that it's going open world. I was kind of hoping that they'd keep it like kind of that Subway underground linear game, because it does look like the next level from that. I mean, the graphics are just insane. But that was coming out that day. Anthem was coming out that day. I believe Kingdom Hearts comes out the month before, and I also believe Devil May Cry 5 comes out a couple weeks after that. So it's a very packed time period. The first month of 2019 is looking to be a very congested congested time for gaming. At this point, it's actually more stacked than what we've got left. I think as far as this year goes, we've got Red Dead coming out this week. We've got Fallout 76 coming out. Spyro the Reignited Trilogy is next month as well. Hitman 2. That Pokemon game for the Switch, which I'm actually considering buying a Switch for because it's a Gen 1 remake of... Actually, no, it's not a remake per se, but it is a Pokemon game set in the Kanto region with all first generation Pokemon, which is actually a game that I've just wanted, period, because as far as Pokemon goes, I've always been just first generation. That's it. I just know the first 150 and I know nothing else. And of course, Just Cause 4 also comes out this year, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, of course, a big one coming out in December as well. So that's in comparison to what's coming out just on the first half of next year. So Sony didn't want to release Days Gone in that congestion, which is very smart. Sony definitely wants to make sure its games have a proper release date, unlike EA did with Titanfall 2. They just sent it out to die. If you remember, they released Titanfall 2 sandwiched between a Call of Duty game and a Battlefield game, which was a bad idea. The game ended up selling poorly because of that, despite the game actually being quite fun. I recently bought Titanfall 2 and played the campaign, which I've heard many times that it was good. So I just I saw it on sale for $20 one day, and I just decided to get it. And I did very much enjoy the story for that. But I believe this is Sony trying to avoid that situation and giving it a proper release date. I believe there's not really much going on in April of next year, so I think Days Gone does have time to has its own little moment there to shine and be released. But this does make me wonder when The Last of Us 2 comes out as well. Because, again, I would think that Sony would try to keep these two games distant due to the fact that they are so similar in nature. And I would assume that they would release it in the summer. So maybe we might see Days Gone come out. It's got a confirmed release date of April 26th. Let it be out there for a little bit and then release The Last of Us in the summer. I would think, I don't know. They could also just release it in the fall. That would also be a very good time as well. I mean, there's not really any other heavy hitters. I mean, you might have the traditional Call of Duty, the traditional Assassin's Creed. Perhaps I'm looking at my calendar. There's not really much else that's as far as the rest of the generation goes, as far as that high of a caliber. Aside from just the annual Call of Duty, again, the annual Assassin's Creed. So, and of course, we do have the other PS4 games to consider, is Ghost of Tsushima, and of course Death Stranding. Those are still coming out as well. Those don't have release dates, so it is only a 2-month delay. So I'm sure whatever Sony did have planned for the rest of its major exclusives for the rest of this generation, I'm sure the release plans of those aren't being hindered too much. I am just hoping, however, that they do keep The Last of Us Part 2 and Days Gone as separate as possible, because they are just very similar. Almost too similar, to me at least. Although I am very much looking forward to both of them. Again, Days Gone delayed an additional 2 months, due to be out now on April 26th, 2019. In fact, the article that actually brought about this news of Days Gone, it's actually the same article. It was actually a PlayStation blog post where they updated the next wave of games, just giving a couple updates of what's to come. And that's where they announced Days Gone being delayed to April 26th. But in that same article, there were some other not release dates, but release periods for some couple smaller games. Concrete Genie is kind of a weird indie game. But that's been given a spring 2019 release period. everybody's golf VR golf game, very popular golf game. The VR version is coming out also spring 2019 as well. I do want to use this to kind of segue into a VR rant. Virtual reality is, I don't know if anyone besides well, of course, anyone besides many people have tried VR. I don't know if anybody else besides me has tried VR. Of course they have, you fucking idiot. So PlayStation, of course, have their VR peripheral, PlayStation VR. That's been out for 2 years. I believe they actually recently celebrated 2 years of VR being out there. And I'm a believer of VR. I don't own one because I just never got around to affording one. I mean, I could afford one, but it's just the fact that it's still it's like a separate console, basically. You buy, it's not just the headset, it's another box and a whole bunch of wires. I'm just not very attracted to a bunch of wires just being sprawled out all over my already messy floor. It's just kind of it sounds kind of tedious, to be quite honest. But as far as virtual reality itself, I am certainly a believer that this is that virtual reality does have a place in the future. My first dabble into VR was actually a couple years ago. I was with my girl at a Best Buy, and they had a little display there. And the guy, hey, come try VR, yay! Hey, what you doing, man? Come over here, try VR, man. You want to try this headset? So I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, why not? So, so the guy wiped the VR thing down. I guess you got to clean the thing between everybody that uses it, and there's a number of demos that he gave me the options of choosing. One of them being Batman Arkham VR, which is from the same people that made the Batman Arkham games. So Rocksteady Studios made their own VR game. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll try that. So the demo starts. I'm playing as Bruce Wayne, but I'm standing in a room with Alfred. But the thing is, he was... how do I explain this? That you really can. It's just the magic of virtual reality. I felt like I was in that room and I was standing in front of fucking Alfred. And I was in front of a piano that I looked down and my fingers were at. And I was, playing the piano basically for a sec. And I lifted my head and looked over to my right. And there goes fucking Alfred getting closer to me. And I actually felt his mass, like, in my... I can't explain it. It's magic. VR is fucking magic. And then I hit some keys in a certain way, and it took me down this... I guess the platform in front of the piano that I was standing on was apparently a platform that lowered, and I felt like I wasn't standing on an elevator, but the way like the headsets, the surround sound was going off, and just the way everything was moving, I felt it in my stomach that I was going down an elevator, and it completely just blew my mind. And then you go to this thing where you put on, the bat suit, you put the cowl on, and there's a mirror, and it's fucking... I was Batman. I don't know how else to say it. I was fucking Batman. And I still remember that pretty vividly to this day. And that was 2 years ago. So, technology changes, it advances, and hopefully we're gonna see another iteration of PlayStation VR. Hopefully one with that's more powerful, and hopefully, given that technology does advance, hopefully we can see some wireless VR that you don't need a whole bunch of tedious ass wires to use it. I am grateful for Sony for taking the initiative and releasing this system, PlayStation VR, despite it not really selling as well as they'd hoped. At present, it doesn't really have that much of a good attach rate as far as how many units they're selling. And I do actually, I believe that it's just a slow burn, and then eventually, once this technology does start taking off, and once it starts becoming more accessible, because the entry price right now I believe is $300. I think they might have lowered the price to $300. at release it was $400, which was the same price as the PS4. So that's probably a big reason why. But once more people become aware of VR and it starts becoming more accessible, the price gets lowered, a new version comes out, which will hopefully make the older versions cheaper, which will get more people to buy them. As that happens, hopefully we can start seeing some real, like a big virtual reality renaissance. And we can see some really cool products being coming out in the wake of that, because I am a believer of this technology. I couldn't believe what was happening when I did play the Batman Arkham VR for the first time. So that's my little rant on virtual reality. I do believe that it has a future in gaming, and it has a place in the future of gaming, especially with the PS5 coming out predictably in 2020. They can come out with a second generation of VR that will accompany it. Maybe I wouldn't say that they should like have a bundle that includes the VR, or perhaps they could get away with it. I don't know. I think VR for now is just a cool little side peripheral to the PS4, but we'll see. The future is unknown, and we'll see what happens. But it's a very exciting prospect, that virtual reality. It'll be very interesting to see what comes of that and what's forthcoming as far as virtual reality goes. But moving on, though, looking at my notes, and I do want to talk about a situation that's kind of old news, but it kind of poked its head out again because it's regarding someone. So you might have heard a couple months ago, there's an IGN editor by the name of Filip Miucin. He's become kind of a notorious figure. Well, not notorious figure. It was just a very dark time for the world of games journalism when this story broke. So this guy, Filip Miucin, he was a Nintendo editor for IGN, and he put out a review. For those that don't know, just a quick recap. For those that don't know, he reviewed a game, Dead Cells, for the Nintendo Switch, or for all platforms. He was reviewing the game Dead Cells. It's a side-scrolling roguelike style game. And when the review came out, there was a YouTuber by the name of Boomstick Gaming, who, when he saw this review, he pointed out that Filip Miucin, the person who reviewed it for IGN, had basically plagiarized his review of the same game. He basically tweeted at the guy and said, "Hey, this guy stole my shit," and that tweet gained traction and immediately became this giant story. And it was a very crazy week there, and once the dust settled, IGN ended up firing Filip Miucin for that, for plagiarism, basically. Plagiarism, as far as journalism, writing goes, is a very, very serious thing. It's, as far as that industry grows, as far as journalism, writing, it's one of the most egregious practices that you could take part in. Stealing someone else's work is very serious when you're in that field. So after an investigation on IGN's part, they just ended up firing the guy because, they can't have a plagiarist working there. So they did fire him. And a couple days later, Filip Miucin actually came out, and he came out with a video which you would think after doing that would be an apology video, but the video ended up kind of being it was very bizarre. He wasn't very apologetic at all. He was kind of deflecting. It was very deflective, pointing fingers at others, basically saying, I didn't steal anybody's work, which he clearly did, and just in general very dismissive of the whole situation, which, given the subject at hand, you should be taking very seriously. And the video obviously was not received well at all. It was disliked to all hell, and he ended up deleting it the next day because it was just not a good look. He dug himself a pretty deep grave with that video. Not just the not just the plagiarism itself, but the video he made after that was just not a good look for this guy. So he deleted the video and he basically vanished. He disappeared for a long time, which, you know, makes sense when you think about it. Well, what else can you do? You just gotta kind of just have to go away after that. So a couple months pass, and we're talking about him this week because earlier this week he comes out with a surprise video. Another video where, listen, after 2 months, you would think that you would have taken some time to, reflect, take a walk, think about what you've done, think about what you've done in the name of journalism, how you've sullied the good name of games journalism, which has actually that's been happening, without his help anyway, but that's another story. Soiling the name of IGN, which I'm sure they weren't happy that, this happened to them. And you would think that if you ever did choose to make another video, you would have to just come clean and fess up to what you did and just apologize to everyone involved. Plagiarism is a very serious thing in the world of journalism, and you should just, if you ever do want to be taken seriously again as whether you want to be a journalist or just be in the industry in general, you have to own up to what you did and apologize. It's as simple as that. And it wasn't another video of him just like the first one where he was kind of deflective. It was more of he did apologize, but it was kind of a self-pity apology where he was like, he very, briefly just mentioned the situation and then just apologized to everyone involved, which in itself should be enough. But given the severity of what he did, I think you have to be careful. You have to be careful on how you do it. You should mention by name who you dicked over. You should admit to what you did. You should say, I plagiarized. I did something very egregious, and I sullied the reputation of not only myself but of the company I worked for. That whole 10 seconds that I just did was more of an apology of what this guy ended up doing. It was a very, I believe the video is still up actually. He actually didn't delete it this time as he did with the other one. If you want to check that out. Although he did turn off the ratings because it was just being downvoted as hell, just like his last video. But it appears like he didn't really learn, he didn't really learn much in his 2-month disappearance about how to come back properly and really own up to what you did. So now the discussion right now is whether or not, he should be, I don't know, I guess welcomed back to the industry, I guess. Which, here's the thing, right? He already lost his job at IGN. Before he worked at IGN, he did have a YouTube channel, a Nintendo-centric YouTube channel. I should probably mention as well that the video that he came back with, it wasn't an apology video at all. Like, he started out doing that way, but I believe the topic of that video was just I think he was reviewing a Nintendo accessory, like a product review, in which he started off basically apologizing. And that's kind of another reason why he's being criticized so much, is what he did isn't really something that you could just just briefly mention and then just shrug off as if nothing happened. But that's what he attempted to do, and that's a big reason why he's being shit on right now, which, I would say is warranted. I certainly would have done it much better had it been me, but I'm not a plagiarist, so I don't know what that's like. But in the past, if I've ever done anything wrong and I really did wrong someone or something, you have to just own it. You have to apologize, say, listen, I did this. There's no excuses for what I did, and I screwed over some people, and this person, this, and this is who I should apologize to. And, stuff like that. And that's not what he did. So again, the discussion is now whether he should be able to make a living doing. And here's my thing about the whole thing, right? What he did was absolutely egregious. There's no excuse for what he did. That all being said, the guy should still be able to eat. He should still be able to, people are saying that he should just leave the industry, which, I mean, given what he did, that'll probably happen naturally. But as far as what he's going to do independently, listen, if despite his non-apologies, despite what he still needs to do, which is he still needs to come out and make a solid apology. And I believe until he does that, he's never going to, be accepted back into any circles as far as any substantial games media. But, despite that though, if the guy does somehow end up continuing to make videos and he somehow finds an audience and he's able to make something out of that, well, then I guess he can make something out of himself, I guess. Again, I'm not saying that he deserves a second chance to, especially with his current attitude. Maybe if he'd come back with an actual proper apology, maybe he can start, setting up a foundation to maybe get some sort of redemption. I mean, it's already a downhill battle for him as it is. Even if he did come back with a good one, I mean, plagiarism is a serious thing. Regardless, it was gonna be an uphill battle regardless, but he's not gonna be, I mean, it just is what it is. He's not gonna be ever welcomed back to any major games media, just given the way things are. Perhaps even if he had given a good apology, that would still be a thing, but he should still, just like the rest of us, he should be able to, I'm not of the mindset of let's make sure this guy never gets, he never is allowed to make another YouTube video, or he's never allowed to make a living doing what he loves. I'm not convinced that he doesn't love video. I'm sure he has a passion for this thing. I have a passion for gaming. That's why I'm doing this podcast. And I'm not of the camp that he shouldn't be allowed to ever make YouTube videos again. I guess what I'm trying to say is he has a very steep uphill battle to make if he ever wants to make a name for himself again. I'm certainly not going to subscribe to any, videos I'm not going to follow any of his work. I think he has a lot more things to do, but even if I'm not, and I'm sure most of you probably won't as well, if he does, despite all of this, he finds an audience and he makes something of himself with whatever audience he could scrap up, then good for him, I guess. That's kind of the cool thing, despite how shitty this guy is and what he did. That's kind of the cool thing about this medium, is that you serve the audience that you find. And if he's able to find an audience and again make something of himself, then who are we to say that he shouldn't? Besides, honest people who have valid opinions that he shouldn't, But besides that, he I don't know what it is about myself that I tend to, especially with the way that we treat each other nowadays, we're always so eager to want to bring each other down. There's people who have like the wrong opinions that, they get boycotted or they get fired for tame, really, even if I don't agree with many of the people that go through that shit, they don't really have any egregious fucking opinions that's worth them fucking not being able to fucking feed their families ever again, And that's kind of just the way I see this, it's like this guy fucked up, he did something egregious, and he's being very unapologetic about it. But even still, fucking, what am I? Do I wish he was fucking dead? Of course not. I have a good amount of humanity in me to at least, say that, all right, this guy, he's never going to be welcomed back into anything major, but fuck it. Let him just find his own audience then. Let him find an audience that knows of his past and kind of forgives him, I guess, and is able to support him some way. If that happens, then we're fucked anyway. Then that's just the way it goes, you know? But those are my opinions anyway. Again, I'm not going to be... This is probably the last time I'll ever talk to him, and this might even be the last time I ever even think about this guy. You know, he's going to scrape on by doing whatever he wants to do, I guess. But he's not going to be, you know, he's not going to be welcomed anywhere near back to where he once was, given what he's done and just the way he's gone about the fallout from that. Yeah, we'll see where he is in a couple years. And if he's, imagine he actually does become a very, just a very independent YouTube creator with a substantial subscriber count. That would be that would be insane, you know, but only in this internet landscape that we find ourselves in would that be possible. So we'll see, you know. I mean, I won't be on the lookout for him. I'm not planning on following this guy anytime soon, but that's kind of the update as far as that. This whole thing happened 2 months ago, but he just crept back in with a sneak video, and I'm sure every time he puts out a video, you know, someone would be like, oh, here he goes again, you know. He's still not addressing what he did, and he's still pretending that he could just, you know, make a living out here without addressing what he did. And that's just the way, you know, it's just the way people are now. And something I choose not to participate in. So, moving on from that, though, the final thing I want to talk about, it's not really a headline itself. It's kind of a, as we creep towards the next gen, I've been thinking about what both Sony and Microsoft can do to, and what they've been doing to kind of put themselves in a position to thrive during the next generation. This will be the topic of the week. It's kind of what Microsoft can do and what Sony can do, and if they do these things properly, they can end up being proper competitors against each other, and we could see some really good competition, which of course would mean good products for everyone. Microsoft, they shit the bed this generation. I mean, it was set in stone from the moment they announced the Xbox One with the horrible reveal they had. But I've been keeping my eye on Microsoft. They've been making substantial moves in order to remedy the position they put themselves in. Phil Spencer came in, and he became the new head of Xbox, and he's been making moves. Last E3, Microsoft announced that they had created a couple studios and bought a couple studios, which includes Ninja Theory, the people that made Hellblade, and there's actually rumors going around that they also acquired Obsidian, which is very big. Like, you know, Microsoft, they're not fucking around right now. They're trying to make a big comeback, and it's very cool to see. It's very cool to see how they're going to launch into next gen when that time comes. And then on the PlayStation side, the PlayStation, they're coming off a very successful PS4 generation. I believe when it's all said and done, they're anticipating selling 100 million PS4s, which is a bizarre number, and creeping towards one of the best-selling consoles of all time, which in the beginning of this generation, people thought was impossible. I mean, many people thought that, you remember those articles saying that, you know, that the next generation of consoles were dead, or that home consoles as we know it are dead, and, you know, the Xbox One and PS4, they're going to release to a dead market, and that couldn't have been further from the truth. And Sony was able to maintain a solid generation given because of things like exclusives. What the PS4 did was, what Sony did with the PS4 is they stuck to a traditional foundation in the strongest way that they could. You know, there's still a substantial number of people that still love the traditional console gaming. You sit down and you just play video games, and you release exclusives that are only available on that console that people buy the consoles for. And that itself, I believe that in itself is what drove their success. You have titles like God of War, Spider-Man, Horizon Zero Dawn, Detroit Become Human, Bloodborne. What else? Uncharted 4, A Thief's End. Many, not just exclusives, but good exclusives. Blockbuster hits that propelled the system forward. And I anticipate that Sony is going to continue that on the PS5. I think the smart thing that Sony did is they set themselves up. They actually set themselves up for the future. We can only assume that they're going to continue franchises that they started on the PS4. We know that Spider-Man ended on a cliffhanger, which is going to proceed into the next Spider-Man on the PS5. God of War, of course, ended on a cliffhanger with fucking Thor. Thor came out at the end, that post-credits scene, and people are going to buy PS5s to fucking fight Thor as Kratos when the next God of War game drops. Same with Horizon Zero Dawn, also ended on a cliffhanger. So that, along with, I'm sure they're going to come out with good IPs, which is another thing that Sony was good at this generation, is not just continuing old franchises like Gran Turismo or Uncharted, but they actually came out with new IPs like Horizon or Detroit, or Spider-Man's not a new IP, but they did begin a new Spider-Man saga, video game Spider-Man saga on the PS4, which is going to continue onto PS3. So Sony, they've set themselves up for success as far as what worked for them this generation, and they're going to continue that into the next one on this particular aspect, the exclusives. The things where they messed up this well, no, I don't want to say messed up. Towards, especially recently, they did get some bad PR as far as crossplay goes. There was that whole thing with Fortnite. They didn't allow crossplay on Fortnite, which, again, I made a rant a couple episodes ago, but I personally didn't think was a big deal at all. There are many, many games that don't have crossplay, and just because Fortnite, of course, is the most popular game out right now, that's why it got the most attention. But they ended up yielding on the whole thing, and they actually allowed crossplay on Fortnite now. I think it's been implemented now, so Fortnite has full crossplay just down the road, up, down, full crossplay across all platforms. And also, another foundation that they set up for themselves that is going to pay off for them in the future as well. Last episode, I reported that they actually introduced full game downloads for their PlayStation Now service. For those that don't know, they have a service called PlayStation Now, which allows you to stream many PS4, PS3, and PS2 games, just an entire library that you can stream. And I mentioned how streaming is kind of not the ticket right now. It's kind of what's being hinted as the future of gaming. Once, I know Microsoft is kind of going, they announced an initiative for streaming, which, I had my thoughts on that, but what PlayStation did was they starting to allow downloads to their service, which means instead of streaming it, you could just pay for the service, and on some game, it's only for select games right now, but on those select games, you can actually download those games onto your hard drive and just play them as if you had a disc, or if you had it digitally, which I do believe by the time PS5 comes out, I think that's what they're planning for. Once PS5 comes out, it's going to be fully implemented to all their titles, which includes every single PS3 game, which, if Sony isn't going to do backwards compatibility, which to Microsoft's credit, they did. Again, backwards compatibility, the ability to play Xbox 360 games on your Xbox One is one of the few solid bullet points that Microsoft has over Sony, is backwards compatibility. And nothing will ever be as good, even despite what I'm talking about right now. Full backwards compatibility would be awesome. But if we're talking about, the next best thing, full downloads of PS Now games would be a substantial leap, and would definitely make it a proper competitor to what Xbox is doing. They also have their own little streaming service. Well, it's not really streaming. That's kind of the thing. That's my point, is that they have a service called Xbox Game Pass, which is another marketplace where I believe it's $10 a month. You can download from a massive library of games that you could just download. And I believe once we hit that next generation, it's going to be full download implementation on Sony's library, along with the already existing downloading you can do on Xbox. So it's going to be equal footing. I predict at least equal footing as far as that. I think if Sony sticks to their current strategy and continue with that whole PS Now downloading thing, because that's another big thing that they're pushing for right now. If they're able to pull that off, then we're gonna see Sony at the top of their game. And if what we're seeing from Microsoft continues as well, hopefully it's this brand new renaissance for Microsoft as well. Speaking of Microsoft, though, one of the biggest letdowns as far as what I think kind of hindered the Xbox brand is this Play Anywhere initiative that they have. So when an Xbox exclusive comes out, it's not just for Xbox, it's also for PC as well. Which, in my opinion, kind of, what's the word? They kind of hindered themselves, I guess. Because what drives consoles is, of course, the exclusives. I mean, if you can play God of War, Spider-Man, or any other PlayStation exclusive on your PC, then it's not really a Sony exclusive. In other words, it's not an exclusive that you can only play on this particular console, which is, of course, what we're talking about. We can talk about Sony platforms and Microsoft platforms, but what ultimately matters as far as what people see is the war between PlayStation and Xbox. They're the two competitors right now. But if Microsoft continues improving, which they are, they announced all those studios that are that they've acquired. I think it is a rumor. I'm expecting an announcement pretty soon, but I do think that Microsoft did acquire Obsidian, which is big time news. And if they can find a way to make Xbox, which is what I think Microsoft kind of did wrong this generation. They did push this Play Anywhere initiative, and they kind of took the attention away from what the issue at hand is, which is the actual Xbox console. They advertised it to, hey, you can play your Xbox games on PC, and just kind of outsourcing to a bunch of different directions, and kind of taking the attention away from what should matter the most to Microsoft as far as this space goes, and that's the Xbox. That's what they need to focus once again on, is the actual Xbox console and the games for it. I think one way they can do that is, it's common knowledge to most hardcore gamers that you can play Xbox games on the PC as well. And I think anybody that cares enough knows that. So I think once the next Xbox come out, they really need to just change their marketing to really market the console version of whatever exclusive they're going to announce, and really just drive that home to, the casual consumer who's, looking to buy a game for their nephew or something. They can focus their attention on the Xbox and say, hey, this game is available only on Xbox, which that would technically be a lie, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, they need to focus on the console space again. That's what they need to do, and they have to. That's what PlayStation's been doing this whole time. That's why they've been so successful. It's a 2-to-1 ratio at how much more PS4s are out there than Xbox Ones, and that's been the story this whole generation. So I don't know. That's what I feel Microsoft should do. I think they're heading towards the right track of coming back. I'm hoping for a full-blown renaissance for the Xbox, and I'm hoping for Sony to keep up what they're doing. If both brands can step up their game to the highest ability and go back to seeing some equal footing between the two of them and become proper competitors once again, we will see some great things come out of this industry. And considering all, the advancements as far as VR, it's going to be very exciting to see these two brands implement what is available now. As far as how far game technology has come, different peripherals and accessories. It's going to be very interesting to look forward to and to see what goes on. But that's my whole rants on this, and I believe that's where I'm going to conclude this week's episode of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. I do thank each and every one of you for listening, and as an individual scale as I can, each and every one of you, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for the support these past 6 episodes. I've been having the most fun I've had doing just about anything, or not just recording and broadcasting these podcasts, but just, planning them, setting up for them, doing research for the show. It's just been very pleasing to do. It's stuff that I've always been doing just in general, and just, reading up on the latest and greatest of the industry, but getting just to do it as a hobby and actually getting to do it in a podcast format, it's been very, very fun. And there will definitely be more to come. And as much as this is my show, it's also your show as well. Once again, the only communication hub right now for the show is my Twitter page, or my Twitter account rather, at ambient_Jules is the page. Send me a follow, send me some DMs, send me some DMs, and continue sending me feedback. I love reading it. And again, any questions you want me to answer on the air, just send them to me and I'll most likely get to them. I'd be down to read some of them on the air and get to know the audience better, because again, this is your show as well. It's a grounded, accessible show, and that's what I've been planning from the get-go. So again, I thank you all for the support. I'm going to close this, wrap this up right now. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode of the DualShock Graveyard Podcast. I am Julian, your host. And when the Twitch stream does start, I hope you guys drop by and watch the show live. It'll be for anybody curious, it'll be the phase reveal, obviously. It'll be lots of fun. So hopefully you guys can catch that when the time comes. I'll give more details on that when it comes. But until then, though, I'll see you guys next week. Have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week. Peace out.